Tim has agreed to talk with us today, and as you can see, he's already invoking the Blues Brothers, which has me very excited for this talk. So, Tim, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hi, I'm a partner in a little tiny consulting firm that is actually 5 minutes away from you. Our office is on West 12th Street, and there are 7 of us, 4 in the United States and 3 in Europe, and so we have an office in London as well. And that's why it's called the Atlantic Systems Guild. And I always have to remember to say my co-author, Tom DeMarco, is one of my partners in the guild, and Tom usually lives in Maine now, so a hotbed of software. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of pick some topics to talk about, and I would like to run this in New York City fashion of no hands raised, just interrupt me at will, and we'll go from that. And I don't even know if I'm going to go through all the slides and all that sort of stuff. But a little bit, Tom and I wrote the first edition of Peopleware back in 1988, I think it was. Then another edition came out in 99. And then we wrote a book in this decade called Waltzing with Bears about managing risk on software projects. And we consider ourselves a team of 2. We actually work pretty well together writing. But I'm a team zealot and a risk management zealot. And the other thing I think that you should know about me, because I think it kind of twists my brain after a while, is for about 20 years, on very much a part-time basis, I'm an arbitrator for the American Arbitration Association, and I arbitrate software and system disputes. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. I'm technically a commercial arbitrator because there's no systems group in arbitration, but they know I won't take cases unless there's something that I have some knowledge about in them. And it's really kind of interesting to look at projects that go through that kind of new age American life cycle of analysis, design, code, test, litigate, and instead of operate, and to see all hell break loose on crazy projects and just craziness and emotional upset. Anyway, what I was thinking about is I'm also old. I discovered that recently, and with a couple of sections in this room, you look like my sons. So, and that's fine, that's great, and I'm all for that. So I've seen a lot. I guess everybody talks about experience. No, it's just you have a lot of years being in offices and seeing different kinds of places. I do mostly consulting, so I'm in all sorts of offices. We were talking about that before, and it's always amazing to me to come into different offices and feel the different kind of culture. And we're walking around in this space, and I've never been here before at all, even though I'm just down the road. And we're laughing about it as, who forgot the whiteboards? I mean, this place it's so weird. I mean, most places with a bunch of developers, there's writing everywhere. And you guys look oddly tidy. I don't know what's going on, but get more whiteboards. You'll feel happier. Trust me. Anyway, so topics I have to discuss. And we might not even discuss them all. I picked a couple. Team magic, the plus sides of teams, that weird thing that happens every once in a while, but not very often, where teams really do something magical. Deming's points, I don't know if you know Deming very much at all, but he has 14 points, and there's one that is just bizarre, and I always bring it up to irritate people because Deming tells you not to do certain things in your organization, but he doesn't tell you what to do instead. But it's an interesting topic to talk about. I just want to show it to you and get your take on it. I want to talk a little bit about agile methods in teams because in the last decade or so, that's really caused a lot of change in kind of team formation, where in many organizations now, the agile teams would, for instance, have people selecting their own work rather than having, a task assignment coming to developers or testers or whatever. And then I also want to talk a little bit about good old team-aside. Organizations still in the year 2006 practice it very well. The general inhibition of real team formation in certain kinds of ways that are probably subconscious, not conscious. But those are my topics to discuss. Let's pick a couple. The notion of team gel, when Tom and I wrote the book years ago, everybody who's in a group is on a team. And in most of the time, they show no team behavior. For instance, you'll have teams of hundreds of people where you don't even know their own names. And you can't be on a team if you don't know that person's name. in the sense of, a work group together. And one of the things that when we first wrote the book, we didn't consciously think of is that we didn't mean sports teams, and in America at least, not in Europe so much. In America, you say team, and everybody has the basketball team, the football team model. And that's, if you think about how we work in groups, that is not the model. I like the Glee Club model, or the swing band model, or something like that, where, yes, you have to try out to get into the Glee Club, but there's not an internal competition going on. The baritones aren't saying, gee, I hope the altos are off so we sound better compared to them, that kind of stuff. And, and they've got different voices as they're trying to put it together. The thing about sports teams that I put this slide together is, sports team has the wrong analogy because it is internally competitive. You have the bench and you have the starters. And, if you're on the bench, I can sum it up with this bubble I invented, right? If Matt turned his ankle, I'd be in, kind of thing. I'm the backup point guard, and I'm sitting on the bench, and yeah, I'm rooting for my team, but, and that's not what happens on gel teams, the magical teams, where everybody has plenty of work to do, and no one's sitting on the bench. I've never seen a bench in software, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, if you think about the bench notion, I've always been remarkable about it. I was talking to a guy at HP years ago about it, and he's saying, people come in and lob these inbound requirements onto a team and just say, oh, we need this, and yeah, we're not going to change the delivery date or anything. Because that's okay, isn't it? And and the guy was saying, where are the cots with the programmers who are sleeping that we can wake up and take on these new requirements, The bullpen model of software. And I've never seen that. Everybody's got a full plate everywhere you go. I know you guys get some time carved out for your own use, which was very sweet and very rare, but usually everybody's got more than enough to work to do on any given day. The thing about the gel teams that are kind of mysterious to me is the gel team is, it's even hard to describe it perfectly. I hope you've been on one. You may not have been on one yet. This is where something happens. It is not directly formulaic that Google or anybody could crank it out, but something happens where a group of people get together and they start to be able to finish each other's sentences in terms of the work that's being done. It's the easiest way to think about it. They start to have a common view of it, a common architecture might be it, or a great design theme might capture people, and they start to work on it together. And you watch where the team will have all sorts of interesting behaviors. One is when they focus, they really focus. I took this picture a while back, a couple years ago, and I show it to managers. I don't know who have managers, and this is my manager test, because if you look at that picture and you're a manager and you don't smile, you're in the wrong business. Go into agriculture or something, because it never gets better than that. Those two guys have no idea where they are, who's around them. They're looking at a piece of code together. They're pair programming it in this one. They're working a piece of code together, and they are loaded. They are locked. They're working as hard as they can possibly work together. And you get these bursts on these good teams where pairs are small groups of people put enormous amount of focus together. And then there'll be rest areas too, right? On a gel team, you'll see weird behavior, like stupid behavior and silliness turns out to be really important. And there'll be in-jokes on teams, gel teams. And in some organizations who are very, Presbyterian or whatever, get really uptight about, it really is sophomoric humor usually is what arises. Jokes and cartoons or whatever. And it seems to be a big vent. Something, I guess it's because of the focus. When you break your focus and you rest up, you need to have silliness in your life. And you'll see on gel teams lots of odd behavior, especially if you're not in the team, what looks like very odd 14-year-old behavior at times. And many organizations have a hard time with that, which I worry about. So it's more fun. People work very hard, but they will talk about these teams with great warmth in their heart. I have a friend who works in Phoenix, outside of Phoenix, and he's a very serious guy, and he I'm with him in his office, and he works now at Honeywell Bull. So the old American Honeywell got bought by the French Bull. And I'm walking down the hall because we're going to go get a cup of coffee, and we're talking about the project that he asked me to come take a look at. And we're walking down, and he's my age, basically, maybe a little younger. And there's a woman who's clearly, around about our age, walking toward us, and we're talking. And as we crossed, the guy's name's Ed. Ed went, whack, and the woman went, whack. And I said, Ed, did you quack at her? And he said, yeah. And he said, I'll tell you later. And because he was talking about something very serious. So we get to the cafeteria and I said, what was the quacking? And he said, oh, back in 1993, 94, we were on a project together and we got called Les Canards Sauvages, the wild ducks, the savage ducks. Of course in French, in honor of Honeywell, of Bull. And ever since then, when you meet anybody on that team, you quack. And they have an annual reunion. One of their guys now lives in Malaysia, and he's been to every single reunion every year. He makes a point of coming back to the United States. He visits his family, obviously, as well. But he and his wife come back, and they make sure they're in Phoenix for the Canard Sauvage reunion. That kind of odd behavior you see all the time, though, on teams. People talk about that amazing project 15 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever. People have spread out, they'll reunite, they'll do things like that. So it's a lot more fun. Interestingly, from a management point of view, is when a team gels, its turnover rate almost goes to zero unless there's some sort of catastrophe. And it has nothing to do with management, it has nothing to do with the company, it has to do with the peer group. I've seen that happen a lot, where people say, I'm not leaving now, it wouldn't be fair. When we get this release done, I've got to leave. I had a project in Maryland where a guy stayed. His wife got this incredible job in Chicago. And basically, they moved to Chicago, and he stayed in like a Motel 6 on his dime until the next release. He said, I'll get another job in Chicago. You go. You should take this job. The job's offering's there. I can't leave now. And it had nothing to do with the company offering any sweetness or whatever. He had to stay for that release. And it was like, I would let my teammates down. It was kind of the unsaid line. And the team was very grateful to him, and it had nothing to do with vertical. It had everything to do with horizontal, going back and forth. And then I pulled this off somewhere, I forget. That's a juggernaut. And projects require self-healing property. One of the most interesting things I see in these teams is they become excellent problem solvers. Something comes up, and it's almost like a challenge rather than a problem or an issue. It's like, oh, this comes up. What are we going to do? And everybody powwows together, gets together. They yell and scream and argue, figure out what their strategy is, how to deal with this. And they'll go over it, under it, around it. They'll blow it up. They'll do something. But it's like, you can't stop us. And if you're an older, confident manager, this is where you go, okay, I just have to do basic care and feeding here and leave these guys alone because they're smarter together than I am. And I don't need to, quote unquote, manage this team. If they can manage the big issues, they can manage themselves, basically. And you just make sure that the organization doesn't screw them up. You end up, I will use the apocryphal word that an old manager friend of mine said, you become the shit shield. And just keep everything away from these guys so they can work all day. There's a kind of interesting notion. But that juggernaut for success, it can't be stopped. If you've ever been on one of these teams, you know what I mean. You know it's going to be bloody. You know you're going to work hard and long hours. But you know you're going to deliver a really good product. And it's from your perspective, not from the company's perspective. It's not Google says, oh, that was a real solid job. You don't care. You know. Right? Together you look at each other and go, this is the Rock of Gibraltar. And we don't care what the rest of the world thinks. Because we know what it really is. And we know how we put it together. And that's the kind of magic of the teams. The other thing about teams that's kind of interesting to point out is they are collegial, right? In the old sense of collegial, where a little town would have a church and they couldn't actually have a minister full time. And so ministers from the areas would take turns going into the little town. And that's the college, the collegiate churches and things like that. And you see it's very much a peer relationship. And one of the things that a lot of organizations don't talk about, and I don't know if Jonathan's going to be thrilled with this, but you are if you're a developer, or a tester, whatever, you're in the federated states of the project, but the managers are Canadians. Right? Managers are different than the players on a project, on a good team. I mean, they're just like Canadians. I couldn't think of a better analogy. More or less speak the same language. They're not going to invade. They're allies. They're friends. We have an open border, but they're not us. Right? And if you're on a team, it's really interesting, especially if a manager is doing, salary reviews and performance things or whatever. They're your ally in that kind of sense, but they're not on the team. When you listen to teams and they talk about we, they usually don't have the manager in mind. And that's not bad. If you're a manager, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to always be. When they say, we did this, and then, Mike came in and it looked like he had just seen a ghost, and he said, I think we got a major problem. We all got together, and we went in, and Mike took the front-end design and blew it apart in front of us. We scrapped a month and a half of work. We came back, we did this, and then you never hear about Larry the boss, right? It's like the boss wasn't even there that day. And it's first person plural is the college of the developers, of the partners, always in a gelled team. So that's kind of the magic. Actually, let me go back a bit.
So the counterpoint be to that when Canada launches a missile at the team, that's antithetical to gelling the team.
Managers can do horrible damages to teams, right? I mean, there's a million variations of team-aside. I mean, the team has to own all the critical technical decisions. And one of the things, for instance, one of the things I see all the time is that the more junior managers come out of the technical ranks often, and they're feeling more comfortable with the technical decisions, and those are the ones they should first release back to the team, right? It is a team of specialists. It's not a hierarchy. I mean, in the old medieval sense of like guild, right, where the master craftsman and the apprentice, and you apprentice to a master craftsman because you want to become a goldsmith too, and that goldsmith, that your boss could do things in gold you couldn't do, and you had to learn from him to rise up to master. I mean, maybe that was once true when I had a different hair color. But it hasn't been true for 20 years on software projects. It's a team of specialists. If you pick any random person on the team, a developer, and you had them disappear, the manager can't come down and do that job. They can't say, "Oh, gee, my network guy is sick for the next month. I'll be the network guy." They can't spell network, right? They're clueless usually, and so it's not a matter of a hierarchy based on skill at all. It's a different kind of job. And I think the skill set of making a product, right, is a different one than the project manager who never writes a line of code or does a test or writes any documentation or any of that kind of stuff. It's a different kind of skills. Right? Let me show you. This is, I don't know if, this is an old guy. I think Deming died 2 years ago, I think now. But he wrote a book called Out of the Crisis. He's written a whole bunch of books. But he has 14 points about critical things. And look, I just wanted to show you this because, honestly, I don't know what to make of it all. And so it's got something about teams and people in it that's really interesting. The first part is really simple, right? Remove barriers that rob the hourly worker, the workman on the factory floor, of his right to pride of workmanship. The responsibility of supervisors must be changed from sheer numbers to quality. Okay, great. Everybody, can say fine. But now here comes the zinger. Remove barriers that rob people in management and in engineering, and I assume that's basically you folks, of their right to pride in workmanship. This means, inter alia, abolishment of the annual or merit rating and of management by objective, management by the numbers. And he doesn't say what to replace it with. But he's basically, it's a really weird one here of, and he's not saying you might think of this. He's saying abolish the annual or merit rating. It's downright un-American. Most organizations, I don't know what Google has. As I said, I've never been here, but most organizations, you have some sort of time-based review. Some reviews are pure performance reviews, and others may have salary implications. And to some extremes, there's some sort of ranking. I just found this year the ultimate one. Lawrence Livermore Labs out in Livermore, California, force ranks all employees. There's an employee number one and an employee number last. No matter what they do, they're all in one list. So there's a manager and a janitor and a gardener, and your employee 37, the gardener is one hell of a gardener. I mean, you look at it, it's totally absurd. But the thing about it is this whole notion of pride of workmanship, right? And what I think Deming is saying is other rewards are crass, and pride of workmanship can be driven out by dangling other rewards. And you drive pride of workmanship out, and then the quality of the product goes right into the dumpster. And that pride of workmanship is fragile. And anything you do where you try to dangle incentives away from the pride of workmanship is very dangerous. And one of the things I see in gelled teams is basically, without sounding dramatic, there's kind of a cult of quality. I mean, on a good team, there's almost not even talk about quality in the sense of this theoretical notion. I mean, it's all concrete stuff, but let's look at this code. Is it good enough to be part of the product? It's not a matter of what is the theory of quality. There kind of becomes a body of work that you're putting together. Or put it the other way is, I look at good developers, and I meet them all the time, and people tell you, you got to meet this guy, this young kid, he's a terrific developer. Their internal standard of quality is so above the standard of quality for the company that it's irrelevant to talk about company standards. It's just demeaning. It's just like, get away from me. I mean, a good engineer will not do some things. I mean, I had a couple of beers one time with a good friend of mine. That was his definition of a good software developer, is somebody who wouldn't do certain things. I'm just not going to write my code that way. I'm just not going to do it this way. I won't. I don't care what you do. I'm not going to do it. It's my standard, and the hell of the rest of the world. This is the way I work. I cannot work below this line. I just feel too uncomfortable. Right? I mean, it's just kind of like, working faster or slower. I mean, I don't know what this place is like, but people have this, and you hear this kind of odd notion of we got to get this done, so let's get going. And people can't sustain working faster. It's like, try walking faster than you normally walk. You can't sustain that. You'll fall back to your natural walking pace. Right? I've been married for a long, long time. My wife and I walk at different speeds. And we finally, I tried everything. I would take shorter steps, or I'd do the dog thing where I'd walk ahead and come back to her. We'd go for a walk in the woods, and I'd go out and back. But if I walked at her pace, it was just driving me nuts. It was so slow. And finally, we decided to stay married and take separate walks. I mean, short walks are okay, but it's just impossible. And whether and the same goes for working slower, as though people want to work slower. If you look at productivity, you can't work slower than you want to for any amount of time. It's impossible. You'll just drive yourself crazy. Now, this is very generational. You ever listen to Bob and Ray? Bob and Ray were on the radio. They're wonderful. And Bob and Ray, I'm sure you can find them somewhere out there. Bob and Ray had this great routine where Ray was interviewing Bob, and Bob was the president of the slow speakers of America. And you listen to it, and it's funny for about 15 seconds, and then it's sheer agony. Because Bob would ask him a question like at this speed, Ray would answer. And the thing about individuals and teams is you have a comfort zone. The only thing you can do is try to work longer. You can't work faster, you can't work slower. And you can work longer up to a certain point. And if, I don't count myself as a developer anymore, but I played one on TV when I was a young guy. And, and there comes a time when you get dangerous, you're just too tired, you're too stupid, and you just don't do it because you're just going to damage stuff. Right? And so, things like overtime are great for short sprints, but sustaining it is crazy. I mean, when you're young, you can sustain a lot longer. I noticed, for instance, I'm going to predict this for you. I used to be able to write code for 4 hours where I didn't know where I was. I could concentrate for about 4 hours. I actually had eye infections. I used to wear contact lenses, and my doctor discovered that I wasn't blinking. And I could just lock in. And now that I'm an old guy, I can go maybe 45 minutes to an hour, even when I'm left alone and I fall out of it. I got to get up and walk around. I just can't hold that concentration anymore. But if you look at great software isn't built 9 to 5 or noon to 10. It's built in those enormous focused bursts where you hunker down and you work. And when Tom and I were writing Peopleware, you start to see that, where one of the things you see is, I don't know again about this workspace, is important because if it permits you to concentrate for those lengths of time. If the space constantly pulls you out of that flow kind of concentration, you get really frustrated and eventually neurotic, right? Where you cannot buckle down. It's a weird sensation, and I think as developers, we need to always talk about that. But for instance, if you don't have a window of time, you won't even start to really work, right? You come in at 9:30 and you're gonna have to meet at 10. What do you do between 9:30 and 10? Email, whatever. Because you can't say, I'm gonna start to write a piece of code for 30 minutes. Because as you get immersed, all of a sudden, boom, it's 10 o'clock and you gotta write. So if you don't see a couple hours, you won't even start. Or if you start and then people start to grab you, like, hey, come over here, take a look at this. Again, if you're really good, it's like the cosmic eraser comes out of in your brain, and just everything that was in there just goes flying out. You deal with something else, you come back, and now you've got that cycle back up. And I don't know you, but most folks guesstimate, and it's somewhere around 10 to 20 minutes for a software developer to resume building a non-trivial piece of code, to get everything lined up into the gray matter, to have code come flowing out fingertips. And it's a non-serious restart time. This pride of workmanship is fascinating to me. I don't know what to do about that. It turns out that the interesting thing about money in all is, it turns out, it looks like for most folks, it's hygiene. And I'd heard that term, and I guess it's the right way to talk it. It's either sufficient or it's insufficient. Either you say, I'm being rewarded for my contribution here at Google, and I feel it's fair, and you're working. Or you say, hey, I'm contributing way more than I'm getting reimbursed for, and I'm grouchy. I think I'm being used in some way. But unless you get to extremes of money doesn't motivate very well. I mean, one of the things I was talking to a bunch of managers just last month was, they were talking about, and it's a big company, rewarding their best developers. And I was trying to say, I think it's a no-op most of the time. The developer comes in and they say, here, we're having a hard time at Blatzko. We're giving you a 4% raise. That's the highest raise anybody's going to get. We had to battle for it. We love you. Here's your new money. And the programmer or the developer says, thank you very much, and goes back to work. I mean, they might go back to their desk and call home and go, hey, I got a raise. Let's go out to dinner. But then they go back to work. And it's not like they go, oh, I'm now making 4% more. I must be at least 4% more productive, to be fair. They don't even think that way. They had an interesting problem. They were working on it. They got a raise. They went back, and they're working on it. They don't go, oh my goodness. It's kind of a, so it does differ if you dangle huge amounts of dough out there. If somebody said to the team, you three guys, you deliver this, there's a $3 million bonus at the end, that changes behavior. But in most organizations, that's not what's happening. And it's not about to be happening, right, as you go through it. So, okay, let me talk, this is another one. Jonathan asked me to come talk for free. He says, this is what you get. It's a bunch of half-baked ideas, you get what you pay for. Again, this is that thing that I've seen. Awards and rewards are, when the organization does them, they're usually horribly lame. The only awards and rewards that seem to be meaningful are inside the team, where, somebody, and usually it's a meaningless award or reward. Somebody recognizes somebody else for busting their ass the last couple of days to get something done, and the team, buys them a pizza or something like that. But in most organizations, managers have this thing about, they want to reward their best producers or extraordinary work, and it always comes out kind of like a forced smile. I mean, I was at a company that builds CAD/CAM software in Southern Ohio. And I've been in and out of there a bunch of times. And I was there one time when they had Software Day, which tells you something. Right. You know, it's the day when the software people are allowed to look at the CEO. Yeah, hey, there he is. Yeah? And the CEO is there, and they have, and so at one point, the CEO announced, you know, a special award, you know, to the I forget the name of the team, you know, the X27 project team, and you know, for a great year and all this stuff, and it must have been 400 or 500 developers and testers, and you know, and there's this, you know, clap, clap, clap. And the most interesting thing was they were saying, "Come on up, X27 team." These people looked like they were going to the gallows. They got up. They look so uncomfortable, and you could see everybody. Other teams were looking at them, going like, "What am I, chopped liver? I busted my hump this last. You know, we did a great job. Why they, you know?" And then the X27 guys have to go up and have their picture taken with the CEO, and you know, no one is smiling. No, it's just horrible. You know, and I went back to the manager and I said, "What was that about?" And and he said, "Oh, every year we do this." And I said, "You must have missed it," but no one was pleased, including the prize winners. And you know, again, awards and rewards are very odd, difficult things to make. You know, to pull the spirit that you intend off. And when I talk to managers, I always talk about be very careful. I had a manager who managed me, who had this really great thing. She would, and she later, we talked about it. She would pull you in private. Her big thing was always in private, never around anybody. If it was an individual who'd done something, tell them in private what you saw them do, why you thought that was extraordinary or whatever. Associate no award or reward to it at all. And just tell them you saw it and that, you know, that was terrific. And she said, I remember what she said to me. She said, "You'll blush, they'll blush, and it's the best thing you can do. You don't do it in front of other people. You don't make a big deal. One-on-one, you know, just a blatant compliment is about as good as it gets. And all the rest of the stuff is BS. I mean, just to give you a flavor, I don't know if you get this here. There's a project I'm working with now, and a group of 3 people came and worked literally Saturday. I think they slept in the office on Saturday night, Sunday. They were there Monday morning long enough to tell everybody what they'd done, and then they crashed. Tuesday, they came back in, and the manager had gotten those American Express dinner on us things, you know, dinner for 2, you know, and gave them to the 3 people in front of everybody. And I could see this one guy. He didn't do anything. He waited for the little ceremony to be over, and he gave it back to the manager, and he said, "I can't take this home." And the guy was like, "What do you mean you earned it?" He said, No. My wife will kill me. If she thinks I spent all the weekend, so she had to spend it with our kids alone for dinner, she'll shoot me. It has to be much more important than dinner. You know, in a sense, don't give me any reward. I told her this was really, really important to the project. So don't dangle macaroni and cheese in front of her nose and think she's going to be a happy trooper having lost a whole weekend. You know, and they got 2 little kids or something. And it always backfires. I don't know why. Okay. Who decides? Yeah, the clown. Hiring. Again, you guys I shouldn't even bother to talk about this because you're growing so in many ways. But the Yankees versus growing your own is what my analogy was there. You know, you buy the talent versus you grow it. And one of the things that I see organizations do and that amazes me is they will be the Yankees. They will say, you know, and they hire in the most absurd way, you know, must have at least 8 years experience, and they name, you know, operating systems and, you know, must have deep knowledge of, you know, auto insurance, you know, or whatever it is. You know, you're just like, you gotta be kidding me, you know, that kind of stuff. And they end up in this kind of homogenized, white bread, boring organization where everybody has, you know, 4 years of Java or whatever they were looking for, as though that was the key to a great developer, right? And the grow your own folks, just to give you a feel for it, I don't know what you guys do, is the best organizations I've seen are usually the real hirers are the developers hiring the developers. That the managers will talk to them for a while, kind of give them the sniff test, and then leave them with the developers. And the developers' feedback will come back like, let's offer this guy a job, or let's, whatever it comes up. But if you're especially trying to build cohesive units, gelled teams, it's not a matter of, one, do you have the skills that you need, or are you likely to grow the skills? I mean, all of you at one point came out of school and never really worked for a living probably. And so somebody gave you a break. Right? And it seems to me that, there are some times when you really do need a skilled, experienced person right away to plug a gap. But in the long haul, the great developers I've watched are more happy because they don't know stuff than what they know. That they're going to learn something on this project. They're going to learn something new. They're much more eager about that than having the skill set. And if you want to keep people who are really, really good, you've got to keep challenging them with interesting, from their perspective, interesting projects. And that is not do it again. Do it again is a big bore in our business for the people who can really pull it off. And there's a big pull in management. Nothing's better than having a quote unquote experienced, seasoned team where this is not novel, this is not any scary. They can pump this baby out. In the short term that looks great. In the long term, into the great blender of mediocrity you go, and it just gets really kind of grim. Let's see, agility in teams, Scrum, you get it, okay. A couple of things that I find really interesting about Peopleware and agilities. One is the agile methods basically, there are a family of methods, let me put it this way. There's Crystal and Scrum and XP and all those things. But one of them is basically co-location, face-to-face. And if you want to build, maybe it's my generation and not yours, but if you want to build a high-velocity team, nothing beats face-to-face. If you're trying to be quick as a bunny, it's really hard to do it with, the Toronto office coordinating with the Tel Aviv office, coordinating with the Albuquerque office, right? And it's a nightmare. Nothing is better than oral communication, grab somebody when you need them and say, hey, let's look at this together. Do you have a minute? It just doesn't work. And it seems to me there's something very satisfying about that. I don't know if some of you do this, but remote with California or whatever. That is, you can have the California, give me one second. You can have the California team, you can have the New York team. They'll never be one team in the sense of what I've been talking about. They'll be allies again. It's kind of Canadians again. Those Californians, they're nice guys, but they're not us. And the closest you can come is if you've cross-pollinated. Like you've actually worked together at one point, and now those people are in California, so you know them, you've worked with them before. Then you can have that video conference love affair that you're having. But if you've never had the physical contact, the video conference love affair is usually a bunch of people staring at the desk. You might as well turn off the video conference and just pick up the phone. It's just not going to happen. I went by a... Yeah. But you can watch, again, I'm an old fart, I know it, but maybe it's my generation. But you can watch, I think I can tell the difference between groups that have actually worked together and groups that haven't when you just watch the video conference behavior. Well, right? And you can see that happening. I've got a client in Massachusetts has an office in Waterford, Ireland. And one of the good things they've done is they get, a couple of months at a time, they bring a whole gang of Irish folks over. And they take a bunch of Yanks and send them over to Ireland. And so they've actually stabilized. Everybody knows each other. The Yanks have learned about, Irish football. And so they find out what the scores are and talk to them back and forth and the usual kinds of stuff. The Americans learn to drink Guinness and all that good stuff. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it certainly is a whole lot better than this kind of them, us kind of thing that usually is they're not us. When you listen to people talk about we did this, it's not Mountain View and New York did this. It's we did this. Yeah.
So I think in general at Google this point is becoming more and more accepted. It's perfectly fine to fly to California with the justification of I wanted to go to California.
Yeah.
But one of the difficult things is one, you can only spend so much time traveling to some other place before you just live there.
Right.
And two, it's hard to get, especially in remote locations, enough concentration of expertise that you can do it all with one team in New York
right.
or Tel Aviv or
right.
Waterloo or
yeah.
without dependency on some portion of the team.
Yeah. Yeah, in the teams I'm talking about, they're usually our working groups. They're small. We're talking about teams at the top end being maybe 20, at the top end. And the greatest teams I've ever seen are teams, are like family-sized teams, 8, 5, 6, 7, that kind of gang size where those people can wail, right? And, well, we were talking a little bit about this. The other thing, though, is, and it's one of the things I think in your world of growth is really hard, but you can fight the fight, is teams need to own something. They can't have a piece of the action. They have to have, you can call it responsibility or ownership, whatever you want to call it, where there's a product or something that is theirs. They make decisions about it. They build it. They test it. They own it. If they're working for a part of something else, the magic just doesn't happen again. It's got to be like, we are responsible for getting this out. If you have only a slice, there's no closure. It doesn't feel right. And it gets hard as you get big and dispersed and you have big projects. It's really hard to do that. I can't say you're going to win at it, but I think managers really need to think about how they organize to try to carve so people feel as though they have a meaningful whole that they're building. It's not necessarily the whole system, but it's clearly bounded. They know what product piece, or whatever way you want to call it, they're building, and that they're responsible for it together. That, it doesn't take you long in this industry. It's always the damn interfaces, right? The human interfaces, the software interfaces. You want to know where the problems are. It's always the interfaces. Mountain View thought you had it, you thought they had it, and now nobody's got it. Those kinds of things. So you try to clear up the interface as best you can, so it's established where I have this piece, you have that piece, kind of work. Nothing beats working on only one project. And again, one of the things as you grow, and I don't know, and you can't do it to everybody, but if you're a manager, I really want you to fight the fight, is once you start to have people multitasking across different groups, they are basically on no teams, is what happens. I've come to believe you're either on 1 or 0 teams at any given time. People say, oh, I was on 3 teams, and no, you weren't. Yeah, you were a Canadian again. You were not on those teams. And sometimes if you are a very distinct specialist, you can't spend full time on one project. You don't have enough work, and that's the cost you pay. I'm saying you can't prevent it, but one project where it's the Blues Brothers. We're on a mission from God, right? We've got one thing to do as a group today and tomorrow and the next bunch of months. This is what we do all day here. And we don't have to worry about the other stuff. This is our responsibility, and that makes a huge difference. If you just think about it, just all the reboot time. If you just start, you're just thrashing back and forth between projects and where was I and jumping around. Nothing beats working hard and going home. Kent Beck of the XP fame has this great thing about sustainable pace. Let's find a work rate that we can work at and hold for weeks and months at a go, that we can build product at. And everybody's got their own different kind of work habits. One of the hardest things I have is I got a lot of work in California, and my clients in California, they'll start at 7 in the morning. It's just like, give me a bagel and a cup of coffee at 8, please. That kind of thing. And I was talking to Jonathan and saying that this is more like the classic New York. Everybody kind of rolls in, and work starts sometime late in the a.m. usually, or whatever. And you work till you have to go home or want to go home, that kind of thing. And the idea of that sustainable pace is a really important one. But again, I don't remember who said this. I don't know where I even heard it, but there's this great line of, don't forget, for every hour of overtime you get, you're going to get an hour of undertime later. That on the long haul, it just washes. You work an 80-hour week this week, and if you're smart, you don't even show up next Monday. And if you're young, you go in Monday and you're smart, you're lethal. So you clean up all the things you pushed off while you were working that week before, the 8,000 emails and all the rest of it that you didn't answer, because you just can't keep that going. And so I'm a big fan of the notion of actually working in the workday. I know that sounds strange. One of the good things, the interesting thing about teams and the Agile stuff is they tend to have fewer meetings because it's more conversations. I talk to specifically someone rather than, if you think about it, there are darn few meetings in our world that need 20 people. I don't know if you guys have gotten into this, but as watch organizations grow, they have these really odd meetings that are just mind-numbing. A couple hours of, like this size group, and you think, what's going on? Why do these people need this? And it's always like people get sent to the meeting because something might get decided. So somebody's sitting there kind of in neutral state and discovers that didn't get decided, and they go back to their team and report, and you just realize you're basically pissed away half a day. And that kind of bureaucracy is a disaster. Team aside, let me I'll shoot them up. Here are my 7 surefire ways to inhibit team formation. Right? Defensive management is a number 1. Managers who are trying not to let people make mistakes prevent teams from ever getting going. Right? Don't do that. The manager who thinks they are the senior technical expert when they're not. We're trying that kind of phenomenon. I'm not going to go through all of them. Bureaucracy is any work the team doesn't believe they should be doing. Right? I mean, if you think about it, I'm talking about a small team. The easiest way to think about it is, what's the most important work I could be doing now? And that's the stuff you work on. Right? And the rest of it comes out in the wash. I mean, you might have all sorts of interesting discussions along the way as, what are we building and what is the complete product? Not just the working code. What are the other things we have to build to call this a product? But that's a separate conversation. Once we know what our definition of product is, then we can drive by saying, what's the most important thing I can work on today? And I'll go attack that. And anything else is bureaucracy. It just will drive them crazy. Physical separation. Now, I don't know if this is going to happen here. We talk about, Ireland and New York and Mountain View. The kiss of death will be when you're on a project and there's 5 of you on this floor and 2 of you on 6 and another person on 8. Right? You've got all this open space and all this stuff, and they can't move you together. And they're telling you this is really important. Physical proximity seems to be a really big deal. I mean, incidental contact. If you watch the way teams work, I did a lot of work at Bell Northern Research in Nortel, and in the winter in Ottawa, and in the winter, I remember one team that was a really great team. People would come in, some people get there earlier than others. I watched this great one. 2 people were talking. A guy comes in still in his parka, and he's walking down the hall, and somebody said, Mark, and Mark unzips his parka, and they're talking about some part of the design. And so the guy takes his parka off, and then another person came. The team kind of met in the hall as they appeared. And it was an amazing design meeting. They had a whiteboard they pulled out, and they're talking, and half the people have parkas on the floor, and the other people, hadn't even gone to their desk yet. That's how teams learn how to work. And they literally could park in one spot and have the whole team parading in to have this spontaneous meeting. And it just doesn't happen, right? I mean, you go to lunch with the people who you sit around. You'd like to have lunch some days with your teammates. That kind of phenomenon. Fragmentation of jobs, we talked about that. Click control, this is a weird one. Tom DeMarco and I were out in the Bay Area, and we were given a talk about peopleware a bunch of years ago. And the talk was over, and this woman from one of the companies in the Bay Area came up to us and said, the only time we officially talk about teams in our company is we have a rule that at the end of the project we must break them up. And I went, why? And she said, I think it's because they're afraid of clicks. And I don't know if you've ever met my partner, Tom, and if you ever get a chance, you should meet him. He's a wonderful guy. And Tom said, without any segue at all, he goes, what's the difference between a breeze and a draft? I mean, maybe we put this in the second edition. And the woman kind of looked at him, and And I looked at Tom and I was like, wow, Alzheimer's hits fast, And, but I knew Tom, so I said, gee, Tom, I don't know. What's the difference between a breeze and a draft? And he says, a breeze is a cool puff of air that you enjoy, and a draft is a cool puff of air that you find annoying. And he ended. And obviously, DeMarco, in his own little cryptic way, is saying, what's the difference between a team and a clique? It's whether you find them annoying or enjoying, right? Because they are tightly bound. There's loyalty to the federated states of the team. And they're not bound. I mean, they're uppity. They're elitist in many ways. And this whole kind of clique control kind of thing is usually fearful managers, as far as I'm concerned. That just, they have the odd notion that they're the center of the team instead of being Canadians. They think they're the, the little piece of dirt that the beautiful pearl will grow around in the oyster. And they are not in the oyster. Right? Forget it. And lastly, phony deadlines. I mean, I don't know, again, being an old guy, I think back of projects with real deadlines, and I can't remember one that took more than 15 seconds for somebody to explain why that was the deadline. You'd hear the deadline, you go, got it, right. We have a real deadline here, we got to do this. Somebody says, we're writing the software for analyzing exit polls for the 2006 election. We got a deadline. It's, November 7th. You go, right. If we deliver a day late, Katie Couric is pissed. Or whatever, So, we got a deadline. We understand that. But there'll be all sorts of deadlines. And then sometimes the deadlines are business deadlines. We have a contractual obligation to deliver this by this date. And everybody goes, got it. Otherwise, we have penalties that are severe. Got it. And don't talk to me anymore. I understand. We got to figure out how we can deliver within this constraint. But the phony deadlines are the ones that, this must be done by October 13th, 2007. And now that I'm old, I go, what time on October 13th? Can you be, give me Greenwich Mean Time here. Is it okay if I deliver by 5 p.m.? That kind of stuff. And you look at the date and you can say, where did this date come from? And the world won't start rotating. And why did you say October 13th? Why not September 13th or August 13th? And now being a hardened guy, I think October 13th is the earliest they could say and keep a straight face. What they're trying to say is, work fast, please, or whatever they're doing. But you look there, and teams are fragile. They need to perceive the possibility of success. Right? That's all. They don't need guarantees. Guarantees are for children anyway, right? Nothing worth doing in life is guaranteed. But they don't need guarantees, but they got to be able to look together and go, hey guys, we could pull this off. Let's go. And then but if they don't perceive, no one ever gets together and says, come on everybody, let's get together and lose. Let's get together, work our butts off, and then next fall will come and they're going to look at us and go, you're behind schedule. And implying, you slugs, you let us down. And people, they just can't, you look at that and say, I have a friend who's a manager here, down on Wall Street here, and he's a project manager. He's my age, and they keep trying to elevate him, and he just loves to run projects. He's just a masochist, and he has this thing of where now he's fearless because he's been around long enough. He doesn't need the money. He just likes to run interesting projects. His kids are all grown, and he talks about Groundhog Day. The movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. He says, I've been on this project before. I know how it ends. We're going to work and work and work, and we're not going to deliver, and then, we're going to, all of a sudden, magically, the functionality that had to be there by the fall will slip into the winter. We'll have the, save the delivery date meeting at the end. He goes through the whole thing. He says, I've been on this project, I've seen it. And the phony deadlines are real killers, especially when you look at it and go, I don't know if you've ever been on one really bad. I call them dead fish projects. The project that starts as a dead fish, it was never alive. You look at it, and you're on the project for like a week or two, and you go to lunch and with a couple of your colleagues, and somebody says, no way we're getting this done by next April, or whatever. And somebody usually says, hey, wait a second, they didn't say which April, something like that. And everybody's like, they hunker down, right? They just get totally hunkered down. Everybody says, oh boy, this is going to be brutal. And, put it this way, if you're a manager, that's management hell. Is trying to manage a project you don't believe in, a project you think is slated for one thing, severe criticism, if not, death, that kind of thing. And it's just misery all around, and it's a disaster. And from a management point of view, you've got to be able to fight, jawbone anything to get the envelope so it's at least possible to pull it off. If people look at it and go, this is just ridiculous charade, everything falls apart after that, right? The morale goes in the dumper, everything happens.
So, I'm sorry.
Sure.
We're actually running out of, we're
Yep.
losing the room.
Yep.
So,
Right. Well, last slide. Yep. Growing teams. I use the agricultural analogy because you can do everything right and not get a good crop, right? So you got to pray for rain, but never push the quality. People say, we got 3 dimensions, time and resources and quality. Bull. There's no quality dimension. I'm sorry. Software has to work, right? I mean, you can talk about what levels you're going to do validation and verification and all that up front, like insurance. But they'll talk about negotiating quality with a team. Shoot yourself first. Don't play that card, right? Lots of closure. One of the things I do like about the Agile stuff is regular builds. People, you're sophisticated, I'm sophisticated. You can look so far out in time where you can say, I have to do these things and get this done by this point. And then there's mañana beyond there. Right now for me, Christmas is mañana. I know it's November. I can't even start to think about Christmas presents for my kids or my wife yet. It's not important enough to me, I guess. But, it's mañana. But, you're on a project and Google says to you, you need to deliver this by October 2007. And you're really sophisticated, but there's a little voice in your head going, I could be dead. And that's, from Google's point of view, that's closure. Deliver a really good product by the fall of 2007, and we will be very thankful and happy, right? But from humans, that's a huge hole, and it's hard to fire up. You have to go to the office in the morning, say, I got to get in there because October 2007, it's coming soon. And we need, to break things down. So somebody says, hey, I built, it's a piece. I can't deliver it. It's not going to be operational, but I can test it. I can demonstrate it. I can integrate it with other pieces other people are building. We can put it together. We can have a little fetal system going. That's closure. And developers, all of us thrive on that kind of stuff. To watch it, I made it and it works. That's no better feeling in life, right? I think... Last one, provide strategic but not technical directions. The team does the design, the team does most things. The manager has to lay back on that kind of stuff. They do the strategic things like how many people do we need on the team? How are we gonna do this? Let's define what the product is, what we have to deliver, that kind of stuff, work together with the team. But get out of them and let them make the calls whichever way they want to. It is 1 o'clock, I will shut up. Thank you very much. Yeah.
What do you think is the around time from marketing and salespeople finding something that customers need at a deadline point for delivery session?
The question was, what's a reasonable turnaround from the time marketing or sales recognizes something a customer needs and the turnaround of that feature? I would say that the prudent answer right now is, is marketing has no idea how much work they put on your plate or not. Somebody needs to size it. I would truly say, if it's such an important thing, can't we work on it a little while and then size it? Right? I mean, is it really something the customer won't take unless we build it in 30 days? If it's done in 35, they're not going to use it? I mean, is the deadline real or not is the question. And in most of the context, the deadline is not real. It might just be priority. This is really hot. This is a great idea. And we want to scoot the priority on it and refocus our folks on it. But the deadline to me, to have a number there is asking for trouble. Just, a number that's there without regard to the size of the work. And I would never think of a marketing person as skilled enough to know how much work they just put on a software development team by listening to a customer give a phenotype description of what they want. I have no idea what the genetic makeup of that work is.
Or sometimes we'll word need.
Yeah, or need. And which customer? Sure.
Thank you very much.